Everyone, this is Sam Stecker, Superintendent at East Butler Public Schools, with another episode of the NCSA podcast. NCSA is the Nebraska Council of School Administrators. It is your premier organization in the state of Nebraska if you are in leadership position to increase your professional acumen. Today we have Attorney General Doug Peterson as our guest. How this came to be is our executive officer, Mike Delaney, contacted me and said he had a conversation with our Attorney General, and he believed that we have a lot of great things going on in the state in education. However, we're awfully busy in what we do, and we have a ton of priorities, and every once in a while some things maybe fly underneath of our radar that could be a higher priority. And Mike and I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to hear what some of those concerns are and maybe become a little bit more aware from a different perspective outside of education on some topics that really do impact education. Mr. Peterson, thanks for taking the time to be our guest today.
You bet. Thanks, Sam.
I appreciate it. So as I alluded to before, Mike and I had a really good conversation, and he said, Sam, had a great meeting with the AG, and there are some things that I think are a priority that are maybe escaping us a little bit, and this would be an opportunity where we could educate ourselves and probably serve our students and our communities a little bit better. So what were some of the things that you and Mike talked about that you had on your mind that you think we as educational leaders in Nebraska need to be aware of?
Well, you know, one of the things, when I came into the Office of Attorney General, there was a bill that was being proposed on medical marijuana. And they claimed that it modeled the Kansas model and also Colorado. And I, frankly, when I ran for office, I didn't see this coming or anticipate it. But from a law enforcement standpoint, and as Attorney General, you stand in the position of Chief Law Enforcement Officer, I was getting information from the Colorado Attorney General's office saying, watch out, this is a problem because the Colorado model of medical marijuana caused a lot of difficulty for law enforcement and transitioned into the recreational marijuana. Now, law enforcement information that we were receiving is that they were seeing a lot of edible materials coming into Nebraska, but also the leaf product. And also the concern was that, particularly in western Nebraska, high school kids would be pooling their money together and sending someone into Colorado, an older brother or something like that, particularly edibles, but also the leaf product, and bringing that back. The edibles almost were a novelty, if you know what I mean, because here this new product coming out of Colorado. And the question, or probably the biggest surprise for me, Sam, was in this whole process, in trying to talk to state senators, this perception among so many people that this is just marijuana and it's no big deal. So what that prompted, and the law enforcement in Colorado was saying, hey, no, this is a big deal. So frankly, in our office, we really had to do a lot of research, and we had to get on the web, and we had to be looking at a lot of medical articles, a lot of articles just in the industry and what they were doing. And one of the things that was real apparent, it was pretty eye-opening to me, was that the marijuana, I call it the impairment industry, because all this industry is about is making money off creating an impairment. You know, you can have wine that's for flavor and taste and a good meal. You can have beer. And it could lead to impairment, or just simply to enjoy a beer or a glass of wine. This is about impairment. There's no question about what this industry is about. And one of the things that really struck me in my research was this industry is very excited by the fact that they've been given such a broad open door to commercialize what they're doing. And so in order to do that, what do? You try to make the best product. So they developed the product under the blessings of the Colorado law to make the strongest marijuana possible. Then they look at the best ways to market it. And what was real clear to me, and this is what I shared with Mike, is it's real clear there's a target that they really want to go after. And that's interesting. That's the teenage group. And because, as any good business development plan would be, this is a great place to get these kids. And they will do everything they can at Attorney General meetings, National Attorney General meetings I went to. Frankly, I was quite disappointed that they even were given an opportunity to speak. But they'll go any place they can to try to show legitimacy. But when you go and look at their product, you have to ask yourself, why are they producing this as an edible product in pixie sticks, power drinks, all the things that are classic, either candies or drinks that are consumed by young people. And so, frankly, we all hated the tobacco industry because of Joe Camel and their focus of trying to get young people addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I look at what this product can do, and this gets to the second part of my big concern. My first part was they were targeting our young people in Nebraska. My second big concern is the product that they're targeting is far more dangerous than people really recognize.
Mm-hmm.
They've put the strength of the product. It used to be typical marijuana in the 70s, ran probably around 3 to 4 or 5% THC levels. Then more recently, 7 to 8%. Now it's pretty common to get the product between 15 and 20% THC. Even worse is they developed a process called dabbing, where they take butane and they will basically develop the hashish oil out of the product, and it creates some call it wax, honey, or shatter. And what they'll do is that intensifies that THC level down to 80%. If anyone were to go and look at any of the research done, there's both the medical, physical impact, and then there's also the mental health issues. And that's where I think the biggest concern is, to me, is we in this state and across the country are in a lousy position as far as addressing mental health problems. We don't have facilities, we don't have enough counselors, and you're seeing it, I'm sure, in our school systems. When these kids develop, and the classic age, for example, developing schizophrenia is in the ages of 17 to 21.
Mm-hmm.
Each individual, and you look at these studies, what's amazing to me is they're pretty consistent within the mental health issue, that if you start a regular usage of a THC drug of 15%, you're going to compromise your ability to fight off mental health issues. So what we're doing is, number one, we've got an industry that's come in, starting in Colorado, but wants to expand across the country because there's billions to be made in this. They're going to target our young people, and they're going to do it with dangerous products. Whether that's a kid eating a candy bar, thinking it's fine, and having a psychotic episode in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and having to be admitted to the hospital because her parents went to Denver and brought back edibles, and she saw a candy bar on the kitchen table. We're going to have situations like that, I think, that are going to get worse. And number two, whether it's in the edible product or the smoking product, we're going to have more kids who were probably susceptible to mental health illness be basically thrown into those type of conditions because of a regular use of a stronger drug. And so that's why I think schools need to be aware that it's not just marijuana. Marijuana is not harmless. It's not a situation where policymakers and school officials can let down their guard.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the comment that you've talked to other government officials and they have expressed, well, it's just marijuana, it's just weed, and it's not that big of a deal. A little bit of history on me. I grew up in Dodge County, and my father was deputy county attorney and then county attorney, and then eventually U.S. attorney for the state of Nebraska. He's now moved way out west, and he is deputy county attorney in Sioux County, as far north and west as you can get. Mm-hmm. And I can remember him talking to me and saying, Sam, here's the deal, is with what's happening in Colorado, eventually high school kids making a run to Colorado to pick up cannabis is going to be no bigger deal than when my father was in high school in the 70s and he had a 19-year-old buddy and he made a beer run. Mm-hmm. And are you seeing, how pervasive do you think that level of permissiveness or that perhaps dismissiveness of the gravity of the situation is?
Here's what's happening. I've had the opportunity, I go out throughout the state and try to speak with law enforcement to get a feel of what's going on. I don't want to sit here in Lincoln and assume that I know what's going on across the state. And I will meet with law enforcement and county attorneys in that area. Then what we'll typically do is try to go to the high schools and speak with the high school students. One of the things I'm hearing from the high schools is that students now perceive marijuana to be less of a risk or harmful than alcohol. And they believe that for two reasons. The most common things they say is, number one, well, it's legal in Colorado, okay? So that creates a notion this is no big deal. Number two, our laws are more strict upon someone who drinks alcohol, gets caught with alcohol, than with marijuana. So we've, in fact, through our statutes, have sent them a message that it's not. And here's what concerns me, is that law was passed over 20 years ago, when it was the low-dose marijuana, and it just made it an infraction. The fact of the matter is, the stuff we've got now, and the strength of that, it's a whole different ballgame. But we sent these kids a message, it's not a big thing. And what strikes me, Sam, that's really kind of amazing to me is I can show senators how strong this stuff is becoming. They can hear stories of in Colorado where young people have had, young and adults, have had major psychotic episodes from edibles, and that they have an increase in driving under an impaired drug, an impairment due to a drug. And so you can give them all that information, and they still, this I'll tell you, the marijuana lobby stands to make a ton of money. So they're walking in our hallways right now, and we know they are. We're seeing that they're registered here. So it is I think it's a big public policy issue. And what concerns me is if we don't recognize the degree of harm that this can cause, we will, on our watch, we will basically, I think, have a significant cultural change if we send a message to our young people that this is not harmful. One of the studies that we saw early on in the process was a study done in Harvard. It was a combination of Northwestern University in Illinois and Harvard Medical School. And what they did is they took a random sample of young people. The age group was 17 to 21. And one sample group had no experience with marijuana. The other sample group were regular users of marijuana. And they defined regular as at least once a week. Now, mind you, this is probably a study group that's smoking marijuana less than 15% THC level. And I keep coming back to that because it does make a difference. In that study group, it was a fairly small, and some try to critique or criticize the study, saying that the sample group wasn't large enough. The test wasn't rigorous enough. Well, my experience with medical studies is typically they will not release the findings unless they find significant findings in these particular cases. And what they did is they ran it through MRIs, and they look at their brain structure. And although the sample group was small, they were convinced that there were noticeable, recognizable differences in the two sample groups in the brain structure. And it was located, the neurological science is advanced enough that they know what regions of the brains produce what types of effects. And one would be concentration. They saw that there was an atrophy in the areas of concentration and emotional, can't remember how they described it, whether it's emotional stability, and in the areas of motivation. And that wasn't a surprise, frankly, because to any one of us who grew up in a culture where we had friends who became heavy pot smokers, you know, what was the net result? Is typically they lost motivation, they were fixated on getting high, and they just, you know, turned into a stoner. I mean, I grew up in the 70s. I was exposed to that. You know, I've seen those guys who walked away from it and those who just basically stayed with it. So, you know, they also, one of the big concerns that they say is the notion kids are given is it's not addictive. And the fact of the matter is most of those, particularly in the mental health area, will tell you, yes, it is addictive from a psychological and to a certain extent from a physical standpoint. But that 1 out of 6 kids, and that's a much higher statistic than adults, but I think adults it's like 1 out of 11 or 1 out of 14 or like that, something like that. 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7 young people who start smoking marijuana will become addicted to it. Now, whether that's a psychological addiction or an actual physical addiction. So I think these are all things that we have to be aware of. And if kids are making runs, collecting, you know, all pulling up their money and making runs and living with an impression that this isn't harmful and it's just something to do for a bored kid on a Saturday night in central Nebraska, I think we need to be aware of it.
I think 2 really important pieces of information that in the school systems that we need to be aware of is because of the context that a lot of people have is they don't realize how concentrated that THC is anymore, and especially with the dabbing phenomenon. And the other part, because we don't have dispensaries in Nebraska, I think many of us in education don't have the opportunity to see the packaging, the products that, like you explained, Pixie Sticks. Last time I saw a ton of Pixie Sticks when I was an elementary principal, and it was Valentine's Day.
Right.
And so the fact that these things are of higher concentrate, it's not what you're familiar with, because a lot of us in administration did come from an age when, it was the whole Cheech and Chong phenomenon.
Right.
And also, like I said, a lot of us don't have the opportunity to see the marketing because we obviously don't have the marketing in Nebraska. I think it's really important information for us to have for awareness. What advice would you have that those of us in educational leadership, what can we do proactively to address this? What are some measures that you think we need to take in interventions, in policy, in communication, in any regards to our students, to our parents, to our communities at large? Like you said, we already have concerns about being able to address our mental health issues as much as we would like, and this can exacerbate it. We already know that there's probably going to have to be some reactionary measures after the fact to address some of these concerns. What can we do now? What do you think are good proactive measures?
Well, I think the most important proactive measure would be for school systems to gather good medical and mental health information. And then I think whether it's in 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade seems to me like an important entry-level area in which you certainly have a program. I remember in the 70s, my brother came back from a sophomore at Lincoln Southeast health program where I think it was Health 101 type class. And they showed lungs of people who had died from lung cancer smoking cigarettes and healthy lungs. And my mom smoked at the time. And I remember he went on to a champion cause to give, and it worked. But it scared him to death to know that his mom's lungs would look like that. I think, frankly, if we could develop a great curriculum for 8th graders about not just marijuana, because we're looking at meth and others, to say, look, here's what's out there and here's the long-term harm this will cause. I think we put alcohol in there. And I don't know if the state of Nebraska, frankly, if we do have a comprehensive program to give them good medical evidence. But I was always struck how that scared the lights out of my brother because he saw visually. And today kids are so visual. I mean, it seems like to reach them, you have to show them evidence. But probably step one is to convince school administrators, look, this is harmful, they are targeted, and it is strong. So in some ways, Sam, I'm a little troubled by notions by adults that marijuana is hip. That, hey, what do you get so wound up about marijuana? We all knew people who smoked marijuana. They didn't die. And the line I classically hear is, it's far less harmful than alcohol. And I'm saying, you know what? You need to have your eyes wide open. Because this $1 billion, because frankly, when they have that much money at stake, they're not going to go away easily. And when our kids are their targets, I'll tell you frankly, that really ticks me off. If someone is an adult and he gets off work at the railroad, he's going to make his choices. I'm not going to fight. They always get mad at me in the office when I say this. But to be honest, it's these young kids that I care about. And I think we as adults, whether it's school administrators, parents, or in public service as Attorney General, need to be responsible about what we tell these kids. And so if school administrators could, I think it would be great to have a statewide curriculum. Who knows, maybe we can generate that out of the Attorney General's office and show it at 8th grade health classes to say, here's what you're looking at. And show it again when they're sophomores or whatever, but to just keep them very aware that there is harm here. And so when it's glamorized, as hip, as cool, as a great high, go onto YouTube and look up dabbing. You've probably done it. And you look and watch YouTube and watch these people get wasted by dabbing or taking shatter. And you want those people on the streets? You want these kids out driving around on a Friday night after doing that? You don't. And it really concerns me. Not only is there present risk of danger that night, but those kids are doing things to their brains that have long-term impact. And And so I think that's significant.
Well, it's a significant message and it's significant information, and I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us. Hope this gets out to a lot of people, because I do think there is a lack of education, a lack of understanding of the potency of the packaging, and it's alarming. So I wanted to thank you for the time. Appreciate it. Anything else you'd like to say in closing before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate the association's willingness to recognize this danger. I mean, I really do think this is a collective effort by law enforcement, by school officials, by lawmakers, of trying to be very responsible about this, because leadership matters, and you guys are in the forefront of showing that leadership, and so anything we can do to support you in that regard is we're all in.
Well, we appreciate being part of the team. As always, thanks everybody for listening. This has been an episode of the NCSA podcast. By the way, if you haven't listened to our episode from Lisa Utterback, that's also available on our website. Great story. And as we move forward, don't be afraid to contact NCSA offices if you think there's a great story that needs to be told about education in Nebraska, or like our episode today, if there's information that should be a priority for us that we're just not aware of. We have a lot to do, but we're always willing to learn more. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.